this morning I would like to talk to you about two people in your life. The first of which is your greatest fan. They're the person in your life that is constantly telling you how amazing you are because, let's be real, you are pretty amazing, aren't you? Yeah, someone over there is already getting excited about this message. I like that. Participation is always good. You are amazing and you're great, and this greatest fan of yours is the first one to tell you how amazing you are. They are out for you, and they love you, and they want what's best for you, or at least they say that, and they're constantly cheering you on. You're great. Now, the second person is your greatest enemy. They're the person that is always there when you are messing up. And when you look in, you dig down into it, they're probably the reason. They're trying to sabotage your life. They're constantly getting in the way, messing with you and messing with your life, and they are your greatest enemy. And as we look at this message this morning, the truth of the matter is that these two are not actually two, they're the same one, and it's pride. Because pride serves as your greatest fan. It cheers you on. It tells you you're amazing. And yet at the same time, it's really right there at the center of all the times where you've messed up, where you've made a wrong decision, or you've ruined your life in some area or something like that. It's always been there, isn't it? Pride is always at the center. And so as we talk about this morning, did you already figure it out, by the way? You did, didn't you? Yeah, I can anyhow. But as we talk this morning, the problem that we're going to need to make sure we don't fall into is that you could very easily hear this message this morning for somebody else. And so I need to make sure that you know this message is for you, because I can imagine if you're like me, you might be sitting here going, man, I wish that coworker of mine was here. Or man, I wish that friend of mine was here. Or some of you are going, man, I wish my husband was here. Or I wish my wife was here. This is getting recorded, right? Good, because I'm going to let them listen to it, and they need to hear this message. And so you and I could be tempted to hear this message for somebody else. But I really think that you're here for a reason. And I think that God has something that He wants to tell you, and He wants to tell me. And I know already some of you realize it may not be comfortable. So can we just kind of it's going to be good. It's going to be worth it to learn and to hear what God has to say to us this morning. And our goal today is going to be to ruin this enemy that's trying to sabotage our lives. But we need to internally ask ourselves this question as we start this morning. The question is this: will it ultimately lead to my happiness to live for me? To live for myself, to do whatever I in the moment want to do and makes me feel happy, will it ultimately lead to my real happiness? Every week, and I hope you can still see the screen. I know we've got these big things in the way. I'm not sure what's up with that yet. But every week, we're talking through this series about twisted thoughts. And so the twisted thought for this morning that we'll sometimes fall prey to is this one. It says this: if I live for me, then I'll be free. If I live for me, then I'll be free. I just want to live for myself, do what makes me happy. And if I live for me, then I'll be free. And let's just start off this morning by settling some things. God wants you to be free, right? Okay. God wants you to be free, right? Yes. And God wants you, now this one I got to pause here, because some people in the church, they don't understand this. You can look at it and you can see their faces. But God wants you to be happy, right? Yeah, okay. Because even Jesus, one of his famous messages, we translate it blessed, but the word could be happy is the person, happy is the person, happy is the person. God wants us to be really happy, not like superficially happy, but He wants us to be really happy. And so that's why He's so strongly against this enemy, because it'll ruin that. Now, we're going to look at a passage in Luke 9 in a minute, so if you've got Bibles and you want to start flipping there, you can do that. But before we get there, Luke is one of the 4 different men who wrote the gospel of Jesus, but he's one of the ones who wasn't there for it. He just heard about it, and it was so compelling, and he saw the effects of it. He said, I need to do some research. So he's a doctor. He's a real smarty pants. And he does all the research to dig into this, to figure out, okay, what really happened. He takes careful note, and he's going to tell us something that Jesus said. Now, here's the cool thing. It's not like Luke got one person who said, I think he said this at one point, and it wrote. Luke is going to tell us something that Jesus said that every single one of the gospel writers also said Jesus said. And they each have different perspectives, so that's not very common. And in fact, 2 of the gospel writers not only say that Jesus said it once, they repeat it. They have it repeated. So how many of you guys think this is important? Okay. Some of you are just like, yes. Okay. Let's see what Jesus says in Luke 9:23-25. He says to them all, if anyone would come after me, he must deny himself, Take up his cross daily and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake, for me, will save it. What good is it for a man to gain the whole world and yet lose or forfeit his very self? See, I've found in life that there come these decision points. And there's sometimes the big ones. You know the big decision points where it's like you need to sit and think about it for a little while, and this is going to be one of those obvious, my life is going to change in this moment. You've been there, right? You've made those big decisions. And then there's the everyday decisions we make. Those ones you don't get to plan for because right in that moment you have to make that decision. And so we all have these moments in our life where we need to make a decision. And as we look at this passage, we're seeing that these decisions can determine our destiny, because if the life we live and who we're living for will affect our destiny. And so I'd like to, and I know some of you'd like to get right to the point. I'm going to give you my main idea right now so that you can, if you want to, just write it down and then zone out for a little while, tweet it, feel like you did your duty, and then go to bed. But our main idea as we look at this passage is this. Until I has died, pride will decide. That's what Jesus is getting at here in this message. Until I has died, pride will decide. And we're going to break that down as we go today. And we're going to see how he's saying that. But as we look at these different points, I just want to kind of give you a feel for how it's going to work. We're going to look at what we would like to say and what we normally say, and then what Jesus says. Okay? All right, good. I need to make sure that you're here, so every once in a while I'll check in on you. So, are you here? Yeah. Okay, good. Some of you are so used to church where you just sit there and listen. I want you to be a part of it. So anyhow, the first idea, the first point, the first thing that we say is, I want to treat myself. I want to treat myself. And Jesus says you need to deny yourself. Now, I don't know about you, but have you ever met a spoiled kid? Yeah, some of you are like, I have a couple, actually. Yeah, and but if you met a spoiled kid, you know it because they're the one who's just like whining in the grocery store or whining at this, at this every moment they can. I want this and I want that, and they've already got so much, and the parents usually going, "Hey, you've already got so much," but they're still spoiled. They're still whining and crying, and they pouting and all kind of stuff. But you know what's funny? I don't know that we've grown up that much. I mean, I've met spoiled adults too, haven't you? Yeah, some people didn't grow out of that whole spoiled thing. They're still kind of feeling like, I still want this, and kids are pouting and stomping their feet and throwing things when they don't get their way. And then I've met some adults who can do just about the same thing when they don't get their way. But you see, Jesus is saying, hey, there's a different way. And if you doubt that we're spoiled sometimes as people, just look at the debt problem in America. I mean, we've already got so much, don't we? As a nation, right? We do, right? Yet we continue to go into debt because we still want more. And we talked about that a lot last week, so I won't repeat myself. But we continue to want more and more and more. And we live in a day and age of entitlement. We live in a day and age where people feel like they deserve this. This is mine. This is owed to me. Now, here's the hard part of that. Before I go too far down that road and I say about people and people, we can't kid ourselves into thinking that doesn't affect us. Because think about you. Don't you sometimes feel like there's these moments where they come along and you're like, I deserve this. Maybe it was a raise that you didn't get. And you're thinking, I deserve this. Or maybe it's the respect that you feel you've earned with that family member or that friend that you're not given. And you're sitting in that moment, you're thinking, I deserved this. Maybe it's just something nice that someone you thought was going to do for you and they didn't, or maybe just whatever it is, we get in these moments and we think, man, I deserve this, and I didn't get it. And we get upset because our pride is being under attack. But let's be honest, this isn't just about the stuff we want. Because our entitlement shows up in other areas. It really does. It's the very reason why husbands or wives will cheat on their spouse. It's the very reason why students will cheat on that test in school that they didn't study for, but they feel like they deserve to get a good grade in. Because that teacher's an idiot and doesn't know what they're doing, right? I mean, so you deserve to be able to cheat and get the grade you know you want. Or it's the very reason why people will steal, will kind of fudge the numbers a little bit because they deserve whatever that is. I mean, we find it in every area of sin in our life. We almost always will find pride there because we're feeling like, well, I deserve this, and I need to do whatever it takes to get this. That's why it's interesting, because the church for thousands of years, even before Jesus came onto the scene, had this tradition of fasting. And fasting isn't something we talk about much in the church, is it? But fasting, in case you don't know, is this. They would do without something. Sometimes it would be food altogether, which, isn't that tough? Anybody else like food? Okay, yeah, me too. But they would do that, or maybe they would do without a certain kind of thing. They would do like Daniel and his guys. They didn't eat the meat and the wine. They just drank water and had vegetables. But fasting is the idea of going for a period of time, I'm going to deny myself. I'm going to do without, because ultimately we believe that God is able to provide more. And so let me ask you this. In your life, what are you denying yourself? I mean, is there anything that your heart desires that you don't give it? Not like you can't give it, but let you choose in that moment to say, you know what? I'm going to deny myself. I know I want this, but this may not be best for me, and so I'm going to deny myself that. I mean, there's this wild kind of freedom that comes in being able to say no to yourself. Let me ask you this. Let's just check if you're on the same page here right now. Have you ever been there where you said yes to yourself? You wanted something, you said yes to yourself, and later you went, I should have said no to myself. Anyone else ever been there? You've been there. You said yes to yourself and you I should have said no to myself. See, here's that wild idea that I have, that maybe in those moments when they come, you can look and you can go, this is selfish. This is prideful. And I want to say yes. And I want to treat myself. But Jesus says, deny yourself. So I'm going to say no to my favorite person in the world, me. I like taking care of me. And no one else is going to take care of me, right? No one else, but I'm going to deny myself. Now, you could be looking at me going, okay, Jonathan, are you saying I can't have any fun? Are you saying that's no fun from here on out? No, I'm saying that you can have the most fun. Here's what I'm saying. I'm saying that you and I are at the greatest amusement park ever. That life and the life that God has for us is the greatest amusement park ever, where we can have the most fun. So I'll say it plainly. Don't waste your tokens on the crappy rides. Come on. We do it all the time. Haven't you been there where you have to tell a kid, no, don't waste it. You're not going to win anything in that game. Come over here. Let's take a ride. Let's do a ride instead of that stupid game. We do that so many times in our lives. We go, well, I want this and I want that. And Jesus is going, come on, this is the greatest amusement park. That's not going to get you anything. Let's go for more than that. And so in denying ourselves, we're simply saying, you know what? I'm going to be a bit picky, I'm going to pick and choose what's best for me and not just go for everything that's offered to me. And that's also going to affect our prayers too, because I don't know about you, but sometimes when we pray, isn't it all gimme, gimme, gimme? Heavenly Father, I need this, and I need that, and I need this, and I need that. And even James, the brother of Jesus, wrote in his book in the Bible that that's going to be a problem for you, because sometimes God will just simply say no to you. So let's check that out. James 4:3. He says, when you ask, you do not receive because you ask with wrong motives, that you may spend what you get on your pleasures. And so he says sometimes God's going to simply say no. And so for some of us, we feel like God's against me. He never lets me have what I want. He never lets me do what I want. And maybe God is saying no to you in your prayers because you continue to pray about you. And until you get over you, he is not doing you any favors by giving you what you want. Wow. Maybe God is being so good to you by saying no over and over again. Because if he said yes to you, he'd be spoiling you more. But don't we need more? Anyhow, all right. So I'm going to have you help me as we go through this message this morning, because I want us to get one idea in our heads. And the problem is we'll continue to feel like we need to treat ourselves instead of denying ourselves, because until I has died, pride will decide. So I know it might seem cheesy, but will you repeat it after me? Or will you say it with me, rather? Until I has died, pride will decide. And it's cute and it rhymes so that you don't forget it 5 minutes from now. That's why it's like that. But that gets us to our second idea. So he says we need to deny ourselves. And the second thing that we'll say is that I'll do what's in my best interest. But Jesus says you need to die to yourself daily. Now, for me, one of the greatest and easiest ways for me to spot pride in my life, and it might be the same way you spot it in your life, is that there's moments, Joe, where I make a decision and I do something, and I have honestly not even really considered or thought about how it would affect other people. Anyone else ever been there? You're distracted, aren't you? Yeah, it's okay. I'm okay with a little distraction. I'm ADD, so I kind of like the little multiple sensory thing. But haven't you ever been there where you realize in a moment you made a decision and you hadn't really considered or cared about other people? And they'll usually call you out on it, won't they? Like, you weren't caring about me or my... yeah, I know, sorry. And that's the way I spot it in my life, is that I really dying to myself is tough because I usually I like to live for me and do what I'm thinking I want in that moment. And we're naturally consumed that way. We're naturally consumed in ourselves. That's why we don't like people telling us what to do, right? That's why when you feel like someone's reaching into your life and grabbing it and telling you this is how you need to live your life, every single person, parents, you get mad at your kids for doing it, you do it too. We all do it, don't we? Don't you live my life for me. You do you, and I'm going to do me. I hear teenagers say that all the time. It's a problem. We all think we can do, you do you, and I'm going to do me, and let me kind of live for myself. Get your hands out of my life. Let me go. And haven't you ever noticed that your greatest personal offenses, when you get really offended at someone, it's when they take a hit at your pride and they make you feel like you're not the one in control of your life? Isn't that when you kind of rear up and you get most offended? Is when your pride takes a hit? You and I, come on, let's be honest, church, come on. We don't get most offended when someone else is down and out. It's when someone treats us less than we deserve that we get offended. And so God's saying, hey, I'm going to free you from that. Christ offers to free us from being these consumed people to being heroes. Because how many of you have seen the movie Pirates of the Caribbean? All right, a lot of you. Good, very good. If you haven't seen it, that's okay. I'll explain it enough that, you'll get it. But in that story, there's this one, I don't want to say lovable character, but you kind of like him off the bat, even though he really is a villain. And it's Captain Jack Sparrow, right? Captain Jack Sparrow. And he's great, and he's kind of funny to watch, but in the story, everyone doesn't like him. Have you noticed that? In the beginning of it, no one likes him, and there's a really good reason why. He only cares about one person, and that's Captain Jack Sparrow. That's the one person he cares about is himself. And so there are many moments where he gets in these moments where he could be a hero, and he could come save the day, and he could give one lick about somebody else, and he goes, I don't. And he does his own thing. But the remarkable thing about that story is that he becomes an actually really likable character and a hero in a sense by the end of it because of one thing. He starts caring about others. He gets over himself enough to start caring and sacrificing for others. That's what I think Jesus is saying by this dying to yourself thing. It's that you start to live in a way that says, you know what? I want to be sacrificial towards others. I want to let my pride die enough that I can care and see others. Instead of just seeing how it's affecting me, I see how these things are affecting other people. See, Jesus invites us into a greater story where we're not caught up in all the pettiness of life. We really live for the big stuff, the substantial stuff. And that's why we can be willing to sacrifice whatever. That's why one of the people that wrote most of the New Testament was willing to sacrifice a very good career of being a religious person to really living for God. His name is Paul, and he wrote this to the Galatians who were struggling with pride, and their pride looked like this. It allowed them to feel like they were super righteous if they did a lot of righteous stuff. We don't know anybody like that nowadays, so we have to imagine what it must be like to have someone self-righteous and they feel like their good deeds gets them somewhere. That wasn't funny, was it? Was it too sarcastic? I don't know. Okay. That sarcasm hit a little too close to home, I guess, maybe. Anyhow, he writes this. Let's look at what he had to say in Galatians 2:20. He says, I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me, and he gave himself for me. See, Jesus already sacrificed himself so we could live. And God isn't calling us to humility because he's prideful and he's jealous of Brian being all about himself because he wants, all the attention. Not like Brian would ever do that. But God's not out for our pride because he's prideful. He's out for our pride because he wants us to really live. And he knows that the small stories we get caught in can ruin that, and they can become a cheap substitute for that. See, we need to die to ourselves. It's not enough to wear a cross. We need to bear a cross. And it can't be just a fashion statement that we kind of walk around in. It needs to be a faith statement. A faith statement that says, you know what? If I die to myself, Jesus was able to be killed and then raised from the dead, right? So when you die to yourself, you know that he can raise you to life. That he'll take, what you were saying earlier, he'll raise you to life. You don't lose anything when you sacrifice everything to him. Now, isn't that a wild deal? If that's news to you, that's kind of you have to wrap your head around that for a little bit, because usually when we sacrifice, we lose. But we talked about that last week. But in our very lives, when we give up and we say, God, I'm going to die to myself so that I can truly live, that's when real life happens. Because then you're not caught in the story that's all about just you. You can live for other people. You can live for something truly great. And until I has died, this won't be possible. You'll be stuck in your small story if I is still the one calling the shots. But help me out here. Until I has died, we're getting there. We're warming up to it. Okay, yeah, a little bit. Let's try it again. Until I has died, pride will decide. So in those moments, unless you die to yourself, you're going to get in that moment and you're going to go, well, this is what I want. But then he offers us one more thing. Our third point and our third idea is that we say, I lead the way. And Jesus says, follow me. Follow me. Now, how many of you have ever been to Oregon? Anybody? Nobody. Okay, there's a couple of you. I was going to say, yeah. All right, good. If you haven't been, I seriously recommend it. It is beautiful. And years ago, I went out there and I was going hiking at Multnomah Falls. They're historically beautiful. They're amazing. But I was by myself. I had flown out there by myself. And so when I met these three young ladies about the same age as me, started talking to them. We hit it off, and we decided we were going to hike together because they were out hiking the trails and all that. And we were going to hike together. And lo and behold, the one girl, she was a PK. Her dad was a pastor. So we had that whole God thing in common. So anyhow, so we're talking and we're kind of going, and we had gone hiking for at least 2 to 3 miles back, probably 3 or 4 actually, when all of a sudden there was this huge tree down in the middle of the road, or the middle of the path. So this tree is down and we have to navigate around it. Now, I don't know about you, but I know there are some guys in this room, guys especially, girls, there's some of you too. But I am one of those men who, I like to lead the way. Anybody else? Come on, natural born leaders, some of you firstborns or whatever. You know what it's like. Those moments happen and you're just like, I'll lead the way. Now here's the thing we got to admit. Just because we say we're going to lead the way doesn't mean we actually know the way, do we? Yeah. See, I decided, I was like, all right, this is just a tree down. We can get around this. This will be fine. So we start walking around and I'm puffed chest, walking around like, I know what I'm doing. So we're going and we finally, after a while, it took us a few minutes. We're up and we're on the mountains of Portland, Oregon area. We finally found a trail and we got onto it. And we were on this trail for another 2 miles at least when all of a sudden we came to a river. And we realized this is the river that we heard them talking about when we first got on the trail, at the very head of the trail, miles away. They said, oh, by the way, the Seven Sisters waterfall, it's one of the biggest, most beautiful ones they have. That one's going to be, you're only going to see part of it because the bridge is out. Yeah, you get it. We were on the other side. The side that didn't have the bridge to get you to the trail. We were on the completely other side. And so we had this moment where we had to slowly and carefully, looking upstream, that's how you do it, by the way, walk across the river because 100 feet that way is about a 400, 300, I don't know. It's a big fall. Big enough to kill us. So anyhow, so it was in that moment that I realized, you know what? My confidence in being able to lead the way doesn't mean I actually know the way. And that's important for us to realize. Because some of us, we live our lives like we know it. But Jesus, when he went to the disciples and he first called them, you know what he said? Drop your stuff and follow me. And those are the two hardest things for us to do. Drop our stuff and follow him. We'd often go, can I keep onto my stuff and do what I want to do and still get the whole salvation and happiness and full life and all that kind of stuff? Can I have all that with? And he goes, no. You need to let that stuff go. See, pride will convince you. It'll always convince you that you know what's best. That even though you kind of feel like you maybe don't, but you do. And you just need to believe in yourself and do what you think is best because you really know what's best. But here's what I want to ask you. Pride convinces us that we know what's going on, that we can lead the way. Do you really know what's going on in your life? Here, I'll check you out on this. We'll answer this more clearly. Take yourself a year ago. Would you have ever guessed you'd be where you are right now? Or that certain things would have happened in your life that happened in the last year? Would you have? I mean, haven't there been things in the last year that a year ago you would have been like, really? I did that? Or that happened? I mean, there are things that surprise us along the way in life, aren't there? Yeah. So here's the way we can put this in the future. A year from now, do you think you see and you know everything that's going to happen in your life? You don't. I don't. I don't even know what's going to happen tomorrow. I have a guess. I know what Mondays look like generally for me, but this could be a Monday that changes my life. It could be a Monday that changes your life. Maybe it's Tuesday. I don't know. Maybe it's Wednesday. Maybe it's next Tuesday. But the idea is we don't know. The idea is that we don't actually know what's going on ahead, and God does. And so we get so silly in times, and we think, no, God, let me call the shots. I want to lead the way. I'll lead the... And he's going, you have no idea where you're even going. Why would you lead the way? So he offers us a freedom to say, you know what? Maybe you shouldn't be the one leading. And that can be hard to give up because we like to kind of be the one in charge. But I want to look at, before we go to our last point, I want to look at what Jesus said one more time because he's given us freedom from living for ourselves in so many ways, but he's going to offer us the full life here as we look back at our passage, Luke 9:24-25. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for me will save it. What good is it for a man to gain the whole world and yet lose or forfeit his very self? The last thing that we'll say is that I'm living for my happiness. And what Christ calls us to do is live for eternal significance. See, we're all born with this idea that it's all about us. We're all born with this natural inclination to think that it's about me, me, me. Psychologically speaking, we kind of have this idea that even as little kids, they kind of revolve around themselves. And we don't entirely grow out of it, do we? Right? That's why we get upset when someone attacks our happiness. When someone does something that doesn't make us happy, we get upset because our pride is being hit. That's why we'll sometimes do shady stuff we wouldn't be proud of, stuff that if we were to put it up here on the screen, you wouldn't want us looking at your life in the last couple weeks. Because we thought that we could live for our happiness and it would lead to our best interest. That's why the advice of do whatever makes you happy, quite frankly, is a load of... Never mind, they're recording this. It's a load of junk. Because you and I, when we live for what makes us ultimately happy, when we live for what makes us ultimately happy, when we live for what makes us happy in the moment, it doesn't always make us ultimately happy. I've done so many things that in the moment made me so happy that just days later, weeks later, years later, I wish I hadn't done, and I'm not the only one, am I? See, it will work.
Hopefully.
If it collapses me, it makes the point even better, doesn't it? If it crushes me, it makes the point all the better. See, we could do what makes us happy in the moment, but it doesn't lead us to happiness in the end. And those moments when we've lived for our happiness in the moment has been the moments we most regret. See, the man who has an affair with someone other than his wife, he did it not because he wanted to ruin his relationship with her, not because he wanted to have a strained relationship with his kids. He didn't do it because he wanted all the stress that he'd have, the guilt that he'd have of seeing his wife and knowing, well, did she figure it out? No, he did it because it would make him happy. Those moments when we lie and we think, if I lie about this, no one's ever going to know. We don't do it because we want to have this lie above us where we have to kind of make sure we tell the other lies that lead to that lie, which allow us to kind of, how lies build each other, right? We don't do it because we really like that stress. We don't do it because we feel like lying is a fun pastime. We do it because in that moment we feel it's going to make us happy. And so this twisted thought we have where we go, you know what? It's all about me. And what's going to make me happy and living for myself, it doesn't ultimately make us happy. It makes us happy in the moment, but it's like any other drug. Our momentary happiness is like any other drug where we go, in that moment, it makes me so happy, but then the next time, I need a bit more. And I need a bit more. And I need a bit more. And so what happens is it actually ends up choking out our life. It becomes a prison cell you live in. You live in this prison cell where it's all about me, what I want, what's going to make me happy, living for ourselves, and it's a prison cell made for one. See, living for ourselves won't make us truly happy. And we see that in the person who is so caught up in sin that they can't get a way out. The person who continues to live for themselves, and the more they live for themselves, it doesn't make them happier, it makes them more and more miserable. And we also see that in the self-righteous and the religious people who feel like, I'm big and I'm important because I do all these things for God, as if God would be impressed by the actions that we do. Whether you're a miserable sinner or whether you are living in your own good deeds, if you're living all for yourself, if it's all about you, it becomes this prison cell that you've built around yourself. Now, the good news is that there's a way out. See, the good news is that it doesn't have to always be about you. And it's a call that Jesus calls us to live a life that's so much more significant and so much bigger than just these little stories that we live in. These stories that it's all about me. Jesus says, no, I get to free you from that. And I get to give you a story so much more significant. See, because as you see in this word, I is always in the middle of pride. See that now? P-R-I-D-E. I am always in the center of my pride issue. I am always the issue. But once I has died, then pride no longer decides. And in those moments, I'm free to let the cross cover at me. And so it's no longer about I, it's about what he's already done. In those moments, it's not all about me, it's all about a bigger story. It's about Jesus. And see, he's freed us from having it to be all about us. And isn't that good? Because you're pretty amazing. We settled that at the very beginning. But you're not that amazing. And neither am I. We sure try hard. We get dressed up nice. We work to live good lives. But really, it's not all about us, and it would be sad if it was. But Jesus frees us and says, I'll give you a much bigger story. I'll give you something so much more significant than that. And so we find that humility isn't thinking less of ourselves. It's simply just thinking of ourselves less. And allowing us to think about something so much more important. So I want to ask you tonight, or this morning, will you join us? Will you free yourself from having it to be all about yourself? Will you stop trying to be everything and do everything and let it all rotate around you when Jesus already is everything? He's already all sufficient, more than we would ever need. Would you allow yourself to be freed from having to be that in your life? Would you look at yourself and think about, okay, where is it that in my life it just sort of seems to be all about me? Because I haven't met a single person, myself included, who isn't constantly facing this battle. In those moments of decision, we have to figure out where we're living for. So I want to ask you to do one thing. Last week, I didn't tell you this earlier, but last week the challenge was to be generous, right? To be generous. Can I just tell you, I told the first service, I forgot to tell you, the finance committee didn't ask me to preach that message. We were actually doing better this year than we've been doing the last couple of years. But you know what's really cool? Can I just brag on you a little bit? As a church, you stepped up. And I got to see, and I'm hoping this week you've gotten to be able to give to a lot of people in a lot of ways. But I can tell you in our offering last week, you'll see it in your bulletin, we had $7,000 come in more than what we needed in the budget last week. Because we're generous people. Yeah. Now here's my challenge. This week we're dealing with your biggest enemy. If God can do what he did last week, what can he do this week? Until I has died, pride will decide. But you could live a much more substantial life than that. You could live a lot more of a free life than that. So here's my challenge to you this week. Your homework for you is this week. Who's one person who's incredibly close to you? For most of you, it might be a husband or a wife. Maybe it's a best friend. I want you to take the person who's closest to you in your life, and I want you to ask them, where is it in my life that you see me being prideful at times? Now, if you're anything like me, are you cringing a little bit? Because you know they might actually have an answer. Because you actually want them to say, oh no, I can't even think of anything. I mean, my gosh, if I was as humble as you, I would be, Mother Teresa or something. I don't know. We think like, oh man, we'd love for them to have nothing to say, but the chances are they're going to have something to say. And so I'm going to warn you right now. I want you to ask them, where is it that in my life, what's one area in my life you spot pride? And then I want you to listen to them. And I don't want you to do what you're going to want to do, which is write off what they're saying. You don't know. Or even give up the excuses. Like, oh yeah, but this and but that and but this and but that, right? Isn't that what we'd want to do? This week, I challenge you. Ask somebody, hey, where is it you spot it? Listen to them. Don't argue with them. And then let God speak to you through that moment and go, okay, there's an area in my life now I know where I can let the I in my life die a little bit so that I can truly live.